Welcome everybody, we're starting. I'm not sure how many people have come on. I'm monitoring the chat box if you're on over here. Just to let you know that with the handouts, Alex, who's behind the scene with Dorman, he's going to put the handouts on the chat box, so you can always download them from there. And be kind enough, if you're on, just say hello in the chat box. Hopefully a lot of people that watched part one are coming back on. Again, another training seminar presented by Dorman Products over here, and this of course is Commercial Motor Vehicle Periodic Annual Inspection Part 2. If you came on, if you didn't see part 1, all you have to do is you have to go on YouTube. I think they all get posted, and just click Dorman Lunch and Learn, and you're going to see a bunch of them on there. Okay, so again, Dorman, thank you again. Dorman's been very, very good. They've given me the freedom to do a lot of this stuff. And my buddy G, speaking of, he's the one that actually got me hooked up with this, just in case, so I don't forget at the end. Tomorrow, and he's been my friend for years and years. He's doing an automotive one, and it's going to be network diagnosis. It's going to be the same thing, same time, but it'll be more in automotive. But if you have friends, or if you are in automotive also, I highly encourage you to go and watch it. He's the premier instructor that we have out there. I mean, he's been doing it for years, and I mean, he's so well known. So please, on your registration, you had that second part over there. And again, thank you for Dorman. Now, this section here, of course, annual inspections, I just basically plugged it out of what I have a program I do like 7 hours all day sometimes, and I call it You the Inspector, but it pertains to all the regulations that we have in this. If you watched last week, I'll hold it up, pretty near, pertains to all the regulations in this Federal Safety Regulation book over here. I'm trying to keep it open because I might refer to it. But this is about annual inspection, so us, with it being annual inspection, it's vehicle related, so the biggest parts we concern ourselves is the part 393 of that section, and of course Appendix A, which is the Bible for everybody. Oh, a lot of guys from Flint Creek I'm looking over here, great, beautiful. Okay, but anyway, please see part 1, because that really set the stage for all of this. Now, the other thing I want to make sure everybody understands, that anything to do with annual inspection, that really that's what's lacking in this country. It really should take roughly around 2 days or so, and I'm going to try to just nitpick and pick pieces again, continuation from last week, try to highlight some key points. But to do a good annual inspection, you really, really, really should have a program out there, or the feds should, that'll take about two full days at a minimum. Okay, and the reason I'm doing that is, it's not just a 2-day program, but they kind of, to be honest with you, as good as they do with some of the regulations, they do really need to, rewrite the regulations. They're okay if all you're doing is going in a book and look at it, but to tell you the truth, the problem is that in the real world, it's us guys, you guys out there, that actually get their hands dirty and actually do the inspections. And that is a big, huge problem too, by the way. My personal opinion is, if you want safe vehicle, it needs to be related actually to the people that actually do the inspections, that actually get underneath it and do it. Like I said, if I had my way, I wish I could get involved and help rewrite the regulations. Actually, I was just half-heartedly thinking that Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg should be watching this video at one time and see some of the fallacies. But I'm just kidding. He wouldn't even know what a little guy like me would be able to do. This on that end of it, on the higher end, that's really for the big players. I'll be honest with you. That's for the guys that are the big shots from different huge fleets and everything. But doesn't matter. Okay? Now let's continue with our journey of this part 2 here. Okay. Again, this is me. Don't worry about it. All I care about basically is not any papers and I did this, that, blah, 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 blah. Let's find out what you wind up getting out of this part 2 over here. Now, last week, I left out with this, last month, I left with this homework for part 2, and I said, we'll just pass an annual inspection just to get everybody pumped up, and I gave a possible answer. Hold down cord might not meet working load limit requirement. This actually came from the roadside over here. One of the officers sent me that. He says, man, he says, check what I got on the side of the road, So I put on there, hopefully I see you next month. But now, as a side note, to be honest with you, there is actually guidance regarding bungee cords in the out of service criteria, okay? And last month I did point out this out of service criteria book over here, okay? And this is what the roadside enforcement guys utilize to put a vehicle out of service, actually out of service. And I mentioned if you're in a fleet or whatever, this might not be a bad book for you to own or to have, and I'll get this out of the way. So now, question is, what about Appendix A? Remember last month I said Appendix A, and those of you watching right now, Appendix A is your actual supposedly Bible for the minimal annual inspection. So what I'm doing is I'm going to read right out of here. This is from Appendix A, okay? And there is a part, believe it or not, safe loading. And this is when you're doing your annual inspection. Part or parts, okay, with S, a vehicle or condition of loading such as the spare tire, any part of the load or dunnage can fall onto the roadway. So basically, it also says protection against shifting cargo. Any vehicle without a front end structure equivalent device is required. Well, that's a no-brainer. You get those flatbeds with a front end, it better be on or you fail that trailer, if they're using it. Now, however, that first part, I said parts or vehicles of condition. Believe it or not, if that vehicle comes in and, for example, a spare tire is not strapped in properly, or, say, for example, somebody did put something on the deck of the truck or sitting on the side of the truck or trailer, whatever the case may be. And if you as an inspector, you figure this thing's going to come off, it hits a bump or whatever, believe it or not, okay, you recheck that vehicle until that owner, and this is the way I'm reading it here. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I mean, how many people, I don't know how many people will even realize that that's in there. Yeah, hone in on that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We'll start out simple. I'm going to try to keep everything simple here. So we'll give another one here. And technically too, when you're watching this, try to keep it in mind that video-wise, we have a movement. You're not going to get a movement unless somebody moves it, and of course, you're going to pay attention to it, or whoever's the inspector is underneath there looking at. And Bobby, zoom in again a little too, So here we go again. Check this tire out in case somebody's going to send it on a chat box and say, whoa, check out that tire. You're absolutely right. I mean, this is what we get out there. So now back up a little bit. Now, I'm going to do a comparison. In Appendix A, our Bible, keep that in mind, if you get in your books, any movement under steering load of a stud and nut, any motion other than rotational between any linkage member and its attachment point of more than 1/4 inch. Out of service criteria says any motion other than rotational between a linkage member and its attachment point of more than 1/8 of an inch, measure with hand pressure. So what I'm saying here is, if you're doing an annual inspection, you're under this Appendix A, and they're saying point more than 1/4 inch. If you're an enforcement officer and you're doing a inspection on side of the road, there's 1/8 of an inch, but you also got to actually measure it, and you got to do this with your hand, okay? Now, in 393, parts and accessories for a safe operating vehicle, it says universal joints and ball and socket joints shall not be worn, faulty, or repaired by welding. Now, this repair by welding, I mean, that's kind of, come on. Who welds it? But it's in there, so, you know, whatever case may be. But my question is, which criteria will you use? Look, guys, ball joints, you know, they're kind of tough. You need to get very, very comfortable, you know. The way you interpret this is your stud with the ball actually moving in there, or is the tie rod end actually moving like this, you know. Either way, okay, very rarely in our world will somebody take a tape measurement. To be honest with you, I'm going to make that decision because my name is going to go on that inspection. So if I have any movement that I deem to be like, you know, this shouldn't be, because I'm comfortable with a good, if you've changed enough tie rod ends and ball and socket joints, you know what's tight and what isn't, okay? So again, this is another area I think they need to tighten it up a little bit. So everybody that does annual inspections, they have a kind of a standard, and everybody does it the same all over the country, you know, if that makes sense. Now here, and believe it or not, this did come in for an inspection in our shop. And if you notice, this nut on that side was loose, the other side was totally missing. The problem is that, and we get them once in a while, I've actually had them on from the roadside where the guy steered hard enough and under a low, this start to strip and walk out, you know. But you can see it's been that way for a while. Let me zoom in if I can. Probably isn't helping too good, but maybe you can zoom in a little better, Bobby, from over there. But you'll see the rust over here. So you can see there's been movement over here. And I don't, you know what? I don't know what happened. If at one time somebody did something and they decided to check the toe in, toe out. But guess what they forgot to do, okay? So this is another area, you know, that's a no-brainer. Now here, check this out.
Yeah, when you see the bond, and you see.
Yeah. So if you paid attention over here, you had very slight movement between the shaft, okay, and the pitman arm, and you just saw it. Now, this, I'm going to tell you right now, this is a such an easy hit on the roadside, because the officer's going to ask the driver, say, do me a favor, shake the steering wheel, okay? And the sad part of this is all it takes is, you know, and I've been on enough roll calls after the fact, just bring your big wrenches. I forgot, don't ask me, I can't remember, it was 1 5/16, 1 1/4, whatever it is. Get your breaker bar, get your big ratchet and socket, and you just take a turn, half a turn is enough sometimes, and it will actually tighten it up, okay? So we're back to the same thing. If that's being checked on the roadside, we need to check all these little things, you know, and I'm going to get a little bit deeper as we go on here. Kingpin. I'm going to show you another version. Would you let something like that pass? I would. By the way, that first one was on a steer axle, and the second one is actually on a tag axle. And the only reason I did it, you know, took a picture of the tag axle, it does have a kingpin, and it's ready to fall off, okay? So if it's a steerable axle, you know, we have regulations that new vehicles have to steerable lift axles and so on and so on. But I wanted to kind of dramatize, you know, how this moves. And we catch them, actually, believe it or not, maybe not quite to that extreme, but we see that happening on the front steer axles where the kingpins go. Eh? So now let's dissect that a little bit. Where would you find criteria on kingpins? Actually, would you pass this? And of course, it's a no-brainer. I wouldn't pass it, okay? But however, do you check it up on your inspection and check for that, okay? So first of all, just so you know, There's nothing in Appendix A about this. There's a section, front axle beam and all steering components other than steering column, and it says any cracks, any obvious welded repairs. You also won't find anything in Part 393.207. However, some states spell it out under, for example, front end. Okay, recheck if axle is bent, excessive looseness in any of the following parts, kingpins and or bushings, wheel bearings. See, I like this portion over here. So no matter who's doing the inspection, you're guided or you're following the directions, and this is what that state wants. This is what the requirement is. So what's this going to force you to do? It's going to force you to what? It's going to force you to jack that vehicle up no matter what. Okay? So it's another example here. So in our shop, we jack the front end up, check every vehicle for kingpin wear and loose bearings. They do wear, guys. They really do wear, you know, and a lot of it is, don't forget, somebody said a lot of avoid maintenance. I'm looking at the chat box, the Anthony, you know, you're absolutely right. You know, let me feed off of him a little bit, okay? The issue is that, well, you know what? You're on the right path. I will get to a slide on that. So actually, that's a good catch on that. But anyway, a little word of caution pertaining to ball joints. Some vehicles might utilize what called telescoping ball joints to compensate for manufacturing tolerances. Now, keep in mind, okay, commercial motor vehicles. So if you watch part 1, what's a commercial motor vehicle? 10,001 pounds more in combination. And if you're earning commerce, guess what? You're falling under that category. So, you know, depending on your state, that they adopt the rules, or if this vehicle goes interstate, you're going to have to comply. But back to this here, just a little tidbit here, okay? Telescoping ball joints to compensate for manufacturing tolerances, typically related to the ears of the steering knuckle. The stud might appear too long or too short, but it is correct. And the reason I'm mentioning it is the stud actually is designed to slide in and out of the housing, which could cause it to exhibit up to 60 thousandths of an inch movement. And we've been caught with that ourselves. A lot of that stuff I bring up over here is like, wow, did not know that, and I thought it was a bad ball joint or whatever. Should I recheck it? You know, so, you know, I'm the first one to admit it. You know, this is why we try to learn. This is why we try to, you know, network and everything else. Because with this amount of movement, it isn't much, but it could be interpreted falsely as a worn ball joint. The bottom line is RTFI, okay, read the freaking instructions always, you know, and that's a perfect proof of pudding. I just had the discussion, I can't remember what class I was doing, about, you know, no matter how smart you are, or you know, don't always try to shoot off the hip, because don't forget, if you got parts and components, maybe for the last year they've wound up having some issues, and the manufacturer component decided, you know what, we better make a little bit of a change. But how do you know they made that change? That's why you got to keep up with all that stuff, you know. So, and I'm trying to watch the chat box here, which gives me to another point, guys. If I don't immediately answer on anything on the chat box, I meant to mention that. Once in a while, I get some enforcement guys watch these too. If enforcement guys or anybody that's got your books in front of you that you carry with you, and if there's a question I miss, do me a favor, feel free to chime in and type it on the chat box. You know, I just don't want anybody to miss anything. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Go for it. Yeah, you can see the play in there.
Yeah. And you can see the play here, okay? And of course, we're back to the Pitman arm too. Now, you're not going to catch any of that stuff unless you physically go down there and move it. You can't just visually look at something. You got to force it to move and check it out. And again, I'm probably going to say it 100 times. Don't forget, when you get done with that inspection, your name is going on it. Does that make sense? Okay. Again, Appendix A, faulty or obviously repair welded universal joints. I mean, nobody's going to weld the joints, but whatever, you know. So that's a no-brainer. Now, power steering hydraulic fluid. Believe it or not, I was on the roadside with some officers, and I happened to snag this picture here. As the truck was sitting there going through a roadside inspection, oil was coming down over here. And of course, when you do the annual inspections, you're virtually trying to do the same thing. So power steering hydraulic fluid leaks, Appendix A has nothing about it. 393.209, the system shall not leak. The power steering system shall have sufficient fluid reservoir. So the roadside officers, they will reference this 393, and you're going to wind up getting an violation. However, if somebody's telling you that the minimum periodic inspection is Appendix A, you won't find anything Appendix A. Now, in my state, check your own state. It does say recheck if there is a visible leak. And if you kind of like, you're going to get a trend that I'm trying to do here. So if you're doing annual inspections, not only, keep it in mind, don't just stay with Appendix A. Do yourself a favor. Also cross-reference it with like Part 393. Remember that parts and accessories in that green book? Because this is what happens, well, enforcement guys do over here. So, and I just failed one the other day. You know, had a leak, and when you're doing the inspection, I really don't care where it's leaking. Right now, at that moment in time, it's got a leak. Period. Okay, customers got to tell me, it's like, oh, I can't get a sticker, fix it. And then they got to tell me, it's like, well, what is the leak? Then I'll check it out, and then I'll give all the information and estimate and all that stuff. So here's another difference. Again, verify your own state's criteria, because keep in mind, I told you there's 23 states that technically are supposed to be equal to or better than Appendix A. Okay, and the Fed said those 23 states, if they put an annual inspection, or the sticker on it, whatever way they do it, it's equivalent to, and it meets all the criteria, and it's recognized all over the country. You know, but back to this. Steering is the same, just worded differently. Appendix A, separate subsystems. New York puts it under steering and front end. Okay, so each state, they'll deviate a little. New York actually has leaking shock is not cause for ejection. Appendix A has no guidance on shocks, just a catch-all paragraph concerning suspension. So again, I'm not quite sure. I guess maybe what I'm trying to say is, they're trying to take comments in, I guess by October 23rd, on, they're starting to realize we have an issue out there, maintenance, like somebody mentioned, maintenance is an issue, they realize that's a weak area. And I was going to comment in there and give basically what I'm doing here and show some deficiencies and kind of write my little 2 cents in what should happen. But like I said, again, those comments usually come from the big boys, and somebody small like me, it's like, who the hell is this guy? What does he know? So, anyway, now we're getting back to that DeAnthony, when he said a lot of void maintenance and stuff. Now, this IM, it's actually coined from, when we got into emissions inspection maintenance, we realized that, to have everything work correctly, if you want to have a good inspection program, you have to have a good maintenance program. If you want inspections to go smoothly, and so on and so on, and it just flips back and forth. So inspection is important. That's what we're doing here. But you can't have a good inspection without follow through, or previously with a good maintenance program. Right? And that's the bottom line. This is a marriage, people. This is a marriage. They have to work together. If you have a weak link here, You know, it's all academic. You know, me standing here is all academic. And one of you guys on the chat box, you actually mentioned, you know, maintenance. Regulations, these are huge, guys, okay? Because of the regulations, we have to do this. And believe it or not, they're also asking in the comments on the maintenance portion here on record keeping and stuff. So I don't know. Got a few days. I'll think about it. You know, maybe I'll just, you know, whatever. Now, why do we care about regulations? Hopefully everybody that's watching this, or anybody that's ever, and I mentioned to all my, like if I do the full regulation class where I cover all the parts and everything, I use this slide, and the one thing I always say is that hopefully everybody that is here, everybody that has vehicles and drivers on the road, they truly believe in safety. And the majority of companies really, really, truly do. You know, you always have the exception of the rule. An exception rule isn't always necessarily because they don't want to. The exception to the rules a lot of times occurs too is because ignorance. Ignorance, what is required of me? What are the regulations saying and stuff? And like I said, I'm biased to training, so here we are, guys. Okay. Now, because we have to. Absolutely we have to, okay? Because if we fail at this bad enough, the feds will come in. And so, for example, if you're a owner of a truck, if you're a fleet owner, they can yank your authority and tell you, nope, don't put those trucks and drivers on the road anymore. And that does on occasion happen, okay? It can save us money. And absolutely, you know, if you can catch this stuff visually with a nickel and dime stuff, instead of letting it get into hundreds and thousands of dollars, that really is the backbone. That's the key of preventive maintenance. And you guys know what I'm talking about. You know, you're even your own personal vehicles. You get people out there that they get the grinding noise when they step on the brake, and their fix is to do what? Turn up the radio. Well, unless you got a huge boom box, there's a limit to how high you can go with the volume of the radio. And eventually, you know, they'll have to, you know, get something resolved, you know. Too bad before they use that fix, if they would have caught it like, you know, when they first started to have issues, maybe they could have gotten away with a set of pads or something, you know. You get the wear indicators, they do a little bit of screeching, but once you get it, let it go. You know, and you got that good old metal to metal, eh? Now you're in the rotors, and most of the time if you're in the rotors, that means, you know, calipers too, you know, unless you're lucky you get the calipers off and all the sliders are free. And I'm preaching to the choir. You guys go through that all the time over here, so, Now, something nobody realizes here, Part 390, that's a general section in that federal regulations. That's kind of like tells fleets and carriers, you know, these are the kind of like in a broad terms do's and don'ts, okay, of being a fleet or carrier. And there is a section 390.35, certificates, reports, and records, falsification, reproduction. 390.35 is the section making fraudulent entry on annual inspection forms. Making fraudulent, intentionally false entry on vehicle inspection maintenance record, okay? And this once in a while occurs in our local paper. Once in a while we'll see where somebody got pulled over and, you know, they decided to pop reuse stickers over here, kind of did their own little scratch and, you know, kind of plugged out the old, covered up the old inspection, the old month, and kind of like scratched in a new hole and stuff like that or whatever. But I just want you to keep that in mind. You know, if it's in here, you can get in trouble, okay? Now, important, I know we're doing inspections and stuff. This fraudulent false entry applies to any application, certificate, report, or record required to be used, completed, or retained to stay in compliance of the federal regulation. So I had to throw that out there, guys, you know, so that on occasion happens. So don't get caught in a trap like that. Possible difference between Appendix A inspection programs, okay? Next few slides are I'll give you some examples of differences. Now, I'm gonna use New York State, okay? Now, different states are a little bit different. I've done regulations, years ago. I did some for a association. I wound up doing it in Pennsylvania, New York, and I can't remember. It was Northeast states, New Hampshire, Vermont, whatever. So I had to kind of get comfortable with their stuff. So, I was involved with one state doing they wanted to get into the heavy duty inspection thing. And it's a hard right if you got to do it correctly. You got to cross the T's and I's. But regardless, so if you're a state that does annual inspections, compare your own state's criteria. So this is difference. This is an example. Lining thickness. Appendix A says less than 1/4 inch. This is a no-brainer, okay? Now, New York expanded it a little. They says New York bonded less than 1/4 inch. If it's a bonded lining, okay? And most of the time, this pertains to smaller vehicles, medium duty and stuff, that portion there. Or with a big duty, of course, is that 1/4 inch. But they also marked, instead of 1/4 inch, they say riveted or bolted less than 1/16 of an inch above any bolt or rivet head, only when the lining or pad is required to be measured. Okay, now this is fine, but for you to figure out, with that rivet head or the bolt in there, you're going to have to pop the wheel off and all that stuff. So like I said, you need to make sure of your own state's criteria. Now, difference between New York Federal drums. Okay, Appendix A, external crack or cracks that open on brake application. And last month, I did brakes, and I'm adamant about this. Why would you want to wait till that crack opens up? That's insane. Like I said, some stuff has to be rewritten. Okay? Worn or machined beyond maximum allowable diameter only if drum has been removed. Okay, again, if you won't know, if you're at the maximum diameter, okay, you need the discard value, which is not hard to find, your discard limit. But however, you need to use a tool to do that, and you can't do that unless you remove the wheel. And so again, and we discussed that crack. I could miss it too. But this picture here, if you hone in a little bit, Bobby, please. Yeah. And if you see very closely here, you see this crack coming through and stuff. Well, pretend that crack wasn't here, but these cracks are still right to the edge over here. I'm going to tell you something. Me personally, I'm not going to wait for that crack to go over that edge like that. That rotor is history, And to be honest with you, teaching brake courses and stuff, it just doesn't make sense at all. You put new pads and all that stuff, and you neglect that rotor. So, and here's your drum gauge that you would have to use, He said, me word, marriage, time to go, LOL. Okay. Difference between New York and federal inspection. Audible air leak. Audible air leak at the brake chamber diaphragm clamp. New York says air leak with the engine running, 80 to 90 psi. Service brake. See if the system maintains at least psi for 1 minute. I do like this, that they actually spell out in Appendix G, audible air leak at the brake chamber diaphragm. Because let's face it, where are you going to wind up having a lot of leaks and so on? Does that make sense? I mean, you guys change those chambers because of diaphragms or whatever the case may be. Yeah. Suspension, Appendix A, New York, again, your own state, are the same. However, New York has included in writing noticeable sagging. I will get to this. Okay. Fifth wheels, same thing. Appendix A, any fasteners missing or ineffective. New York, however, says reject if more than 20% of fasteners per side is missing or ineffective. Again, if I'm doing an annual inspection, I prefer that Appendix A, that 20% that comes from the out of service, by the way. Appendix A, more than 3/8 horizontal movement between pivot bracket and pin and bracket. New York, more than 1/4 inch horizontal movement between pivot bracket, pin and bracket. So as you're starting to see, you're going to see that we have a little bit of a trend here of, is everybody connected? Okay. Slider and power unit. Appendix A, 3/8 between slider, bracket, and base. New York, movement of more than 1/4 between slider and housing. Sliders, horizontal movement between upper and lower. Fifth wheel halves exceed 1/2 inch. Okay. So first of all, for you to find that out, if you're doing inspections, you're going to have to be hooked up to a trailer, aren't you? You're going to have to make sure that you're going to get movement over here. Now, here's another thing, and this is good information, by the way, guys, too, because if you got a coupler plate, you know, New York has criteria for effective mounting bolts. So, example, if you use, these are the coupler plates, if you back up, these are the coupler plates that are on a trailer, predominantly on tankers. You know, you get the whole coupler plate unit and you bolt it up from side to side, and they actually have criteria, if you can zoom in again, with the amount of bolts. 1/2-inch bolts total 10, 5 per side. 5/8 bolts total 8, 4 per side. Okay. Appendix A does not spell this out. However, the out of service criteria book does have that in there. Now, this picture here this was from the roadside, okay? My point being is the reason you see these marks over here, you know, they're all rusty here, but these bolts are loose. So, my point being with this is that if they're catching it on the roadside, we need to make sure that when we do our inspections, we need to do it correctly too, okay? Trailers, commercial motor vehicles. My suggestion is, if you do trailers, you know, if you have any doubts, disconnect that tractor. Actually get a good look there, because you might have dishing in there and so on and so on, okay? So don't neglect the trailer. Don't just walk around, you know. It's in there. It's your responsibility. Now, this slide here is part of inspection, is knowing where to look for high probability defects. And I've learned that this is the fifth wheel here. Speaking of upper couplers, this is the upper coupler on a tanker. I've learned to peek my head in through there, okay? My son, who does the majority of inspections, he's found so many coupler plates, especially with tankers. Don't forget the sloshing they take. They take a lot of abuse. And now I took a close-up over here, and this particular vehicle did come in for an inspection. And look at the crack over here. Now, basically, I mean, I wouldn't let it go, okay? But if you did not look at that, you might miss it. But what about you got your new sticker on, and that officer crawls underneath, and they decide to look under, and they catch it, you know? So we're gonna have egg on our face over that. Do these wear? You better believe it, they wear. You know, I got a few over here. You know, somebody doesn't take care of the fifth wheel. You know, driver keeps his mouth shut, gets a lot of slapping, you know, between the coupler and the pin. And the reason you have it initially is maybe that fifth wheel should have been adjusted a long time ago. But it's only common sense. If you let it get loose, the longer you utilize it, the longer you use it, the more you do of this, eventually you're going to wind up with this. Holland has a really nice gauge over here, and you know, if anybody ever questions me, why did you fail it, you know, I can say, here, these are the factory specs. Take a look at the gauge. It's kind of like a no-go gauge, okay? And of course, after a while, you do enough of these, you find out that, oh wow, these last couple of years, this particular manufacturer seems to have a crack all in the same spot. So you start looking for that anytime one of those comes in. I mean, you should be looking for cracks, period, anyway, you know. Only time I've seen that on a trailer, mistraining or not raising on land gear, lack of grease. Absolutely. You're on the money too. You know, when it comes to that training, doesn't matter. It's not just us guys. It's that driver too. You know, they're kind of like, here, you got your CDL hop. I'm looking at the chat box over here with the Anthony, you know. Unfortunately, it's like, okay, you got your CDL, you know, a lot of driving schools, and not all of them, but a lot of them, their main goal is just to get the driver to get his CDL. But you know yourself, you know, there's more to driving than just having that license in your pocket, you know. Again, you need to do that kind of stuff, you know. I know those fifth wheels can get awful pricey, and within the last 2 years, those fifth wheels have really gotten pricey. I used to rebuild them, but lately I'm doing things a little bit differently. I'm not quite sure if I want some of the liability, especially when you do the insides at the fifth wheels, so. Tires, Appendix A does a better job with criteria for tires. Weight carried exceeds tire load limit. This includes overloaded tire resulting from low pressure. New York has pressure below manufacturer spec. Do not reject, notify customer. Now, the reason I like this Appendix A, okay, and we've caught a few of these. First of all, you need to get comfortable with tires. And I tell everybody, I don't care what size vehicle is, let's start with the pressures. Don't go just because the tires had X amount of pressure on the sidewall. You always go by the manufacturer's criteria on the door, and they better have it on there, because there's a lot of recalls out there, brand new vehicles that they mislabeled or missing something on the labels. I get the recalls every Monday, okay? But you'll also have a load rating in there. For example, you got an E over here, and if you zoom in, but what happens is, on occasion, somebody will change a tire, okay, and I marked it over load range E, okay, and they might put a different tire on for whatever reason. Well, what you do with your passenger vehicles, it's like, do what you want, okay. However, here's a commercial motor vehicle. This is a shredded box over here. This is a huge box. It's on a chassis, and anytime somebody adds something to a chassis, you're going to get involved with a third-party alterer. Well, just think about this. This is very, very heavy. There's this huge, very huge shredding machine in there, okay? So it's a lot of weight. There's a lot of hydraulics, tanks, and all sorts of stuff in there. So what happened was, because of what? The weight changed, right? So now, what happens here is they got to put new information here, okay? And of course, it needed a different load rated tire over here. But when we did the inspection, we just happened to catch it, because we've run into that every once in a while. Guess what? Even though it required it, they said it, they put it on here, but it slipped through the cracks. Somebody did not change the tire. So again, that's what we're here for, learn all these little tidbits. And if you go on 393, you'll see tire loading restrictions and so on, Now, my thing is, and I don't have time to do that, we're trying to stay here. Tires is huge, guys. I mean, that's what holds a vehicle up. Actually, it's air in a tire holds a vehicle up. But that's your connection between the road and that vehicle, is that tire, okay? So just keep this thought in your mind. How knowledgeable are you regarding tires? Where would you find this information about tires? Part 393, Appendix A. How about the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standard 571.119, also 571.120, New York State or your state annual inspection requirements, manufacturers, Tire Manufacturers Associations, OSHA. Are there differences between Appendix A and your state inspection criteria? So real fast, I just want to show you the scary picture of loose fifth wheel. That's James, that's oh shit, excuse me, I hit the button here and I lost chat box here. But James, scary picture of loose fifth wheel. You're absolutely right. One of the things I do is that you guys might have your own fleet, and you really take good care of them. And like I said before, majority of good fleets are really good. You guys do. Everybody does a great job. But unfortunately, if you spend time, for example, on the roadside and stuff, and all the data on the violations, and I pluck them out almost pretty near every month, they tell a different bit of a story. And this is, the sad part is that this is the kind of stuff that also is caught on the roadsides and everything, And that's why I said, too, that maybe we need to rethink of how everything is done. We need to kind of incorporate that maintenance. We need to clarify these inspection programs a little, because for my money, we've been doing it for years. Enforcement has been out there for years, and nothing ever seems to change. So maybe the time has come somebody to grab the bull by the horn and actually make a difference. But back to this, I wanted to show you here this book over here, Truck light truck tires, and get your hands on stuff like this, okay? I mean, there's materials out there that give a really good explanation on tires. This is from the Rubber Manufacturer Association. I mean, that's how I learn a lot of times. If I have a question, if I run across something that this does not make sense at all, I'll spend a lot of time and go to the sources and see, because there's a lot of good people out there, you know. So tires, Appendix A follows requirements 393, and of course this is a commercial motor vehicle, so 430 seconds on the steer axle, 230 seconds on all other axles. Out of service does drop it down, okay? So for the steer axle, if you're still going to get a violation if you get on the roadside if you're between a 4 and 2, but if you have 230 seconds on the steer axle only, you're out of service, and of course, you know, 130 seconds on all other steer axles. Don't forget the sidewalls. Most of our trucks have dual wheels. You need to slip your head in there and go for it, you know. And it's actually written out that, you know, if it reaches the cords and so on, you're done. And I have no qualms, even if this is kind of extreme. I don't even have to do anything. But if you have a little bit of slit here, okay, and I should have put some other pictures in there, I'll take my knife blade or something and see if it touches the cord, you know. Hey, it's your name that's going on this. So here it is. All I'm trying to show here is you do have wear indicators, you do have stone ejectors. So when you do your measurements, do them on the wear indicators, okay? Measurements should not be made on stone injectors. So I threw this in because I'm over here talking about 430 seconds, 230 seconds. Everybody does it. You know, you'd use the tire depth gauges, tread depth gauges and stuff. But do you want to know the truth? This is not rocket science. I should not need any gauge or anything to figure out if there is an issue in there, you know, so, you know. But they're on the road. So now we're into cracked wheels over here. And somebody's going to say, it's like, man, how could you miss that? Okay, and in part, I threw that in there. It's in 393, 205, if you want to go a little bit more to. I'll be honest with you, and of course, this is an older wheel, right? You see the spacer in here, but you always would like this picture, use an example. I could miss it. To be honest with you, I could miss it. What if this crack was up on top, okay? And I'm walking around, standing, doing a visual, okay? So unless I get on a creeper and I see that upward view of that thing, or if I'm lucky, the vehicle stopped, you know, at that position where the crack is on the bottom, I could miss it, guys. The only reason I'm saying that is maybe once in a while we should do it a little bit differently or keep those things in mind, eh? Wheels and rims are straightforward, cracked or broken or has elongated bolt holes. Fasteners, any loose, missing, broken, cracked, stripped, or otherwise ineffective fasteners. Now, if you zoom in over here, okay, a little bit, Bobby. Now, on these aluminum, these polished wheels and everything else, sometimes these are hard to see. You really have to get in there and you gotta look at them. So zoom out a little bit, okay. Now, here's a perfect example. If you can zoom in over here, I'll try to do that, or else I'll try to do it with my laptop. But you can see over here, there's a fine crack over here, okay? Now, if you zoom in over on that side, Bobby, the cracks are just barely visible over here, okay? Just barely visible. So if you're doing inspections, you gotta really look. But on this side over here, the crack is actually through over here, because this is between the duals over here. So again, how sharp are you at looking for that kind of stuff? You know,
Go for it. I guess this is self-explanatory.
They're tight though.
Yeah, but the lug nuts are tight. Very good point. Yeah.
It should pass.
Yeah, it should pass.
I'm gonna back up a couple of slides here, if I remember which one it is, okay? And it actually states fasteners, any loose, missing, broken, cracked, stripped, or otherwise ineffective fasteners. I just thought it was kind of like, if you listen closely, we're going to do one more time.
I guess this is self-explanatory.
They're tight though.
Yeah. But the lug nuts are tight. Very good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Should pass.
Yeah,
It should pass. So it's just, I'm trying to keep a sense of humor in this thing too here. So, windshields. Windshields are a hard read. New York State says recheck if there's a crack more than 11 inches long, any part which extends path of windshield wipers. Appendix A, any crack not over 1/4 inch wide if not intersected by any other crack. While you're reading this, I'm gonna, and you can leave that up, Bobby. What I'm doing here is I actually tabbed my windshield here. I did that for a reason. And it's under windshield glazing in Appendix A. It says, parenthesis, not including a 2-inch border at the top, a 1-inch border at each side, and the area below the topmost portion of the steering wheel. So basically, ignore if it's 2 inches on the top, inch on the border on the side. However, any crack, discoloration, or vision-reducing matter, except 1, coloring or tinting applied at time of manufacture. 2, any crack not over 1/4 inch wide if not intersected by any other crack. 3, any damaged area not more than 3/4 inch in diameter if not closer than 3 inches to any other such damaged area. 4, labels, stickers, decalcomania, and so on. Okay, and then it says reference go into 393.60 for exceptions. Okay, so I wanted to read that to you. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. And if you get those cracks, once in a while I get them, and I'll be honest with you, I can't remember everything. I do go into that section because, let's face it, is that crack within the 2 inches? Is it within the 1 inch and stuff? That's why I said sometimes that's a hard read, okay? And I have no shame if a vehicle comes in. If I have any doubts, I get in the books, guys. Now, watch this. Okay, this is a truck came in for an annual inspection, and my son Brian went through everything. And he discovered something here. And you want to try opening the door first? Open, close the door. The windshield actually moved. Let's try pushing in the windshield. You can actually see the windshield push out. I mean, the whole windshield is like that. And, you can actually see gaps. If I took a visual, it's a little too hard to see, but let's try the top. That's the windshield moving. I know Brian is strong, but he ain't moving the truck, so yeah. The bottom line on this is it came in here, again, for an annual inspection, so my question is, how would you treat this? First of all, a couple of things. It did come in for an annual inspection. Believe it or not, before they brought it in, it did have a cracked windshield, and this particular company had somebody install a windshield. First of all, me personally, I would never use those windshield people again. But more importantly, I read you the criteria for windshields and stuff. So my question to you guys is, what would you do if that vehicle came in? There are no cracks in there, otherwise it meets all the criteria, Now, me personally, we failed it. Not because it's in there, but I don't want to have my name on it. If this windshield is moving that hard, and this guy's going down the road, and that windshield ever popped off, and it starts flying over the vehicle, wind takes it, and it gets into somebody's windshield, a passenger vehicle, somebody gets hurt, I don't want to go through all that BS with that, So, and all it takes is maybe a little bit of wordage, a little bit different, you know, just add some wordage to those regulations, knowing that in the real world that could happen, you know, windshield not properly installed or something, whatever the case may be, you know. But hopefully you're starting to see what I'm trying to do here. So what type of equipment is this? This is a smaller tow behind trailer. The only reason I put that in there is because, just a reminder, commercial motor vehicles, 10,001 pounds, worn spring pins, pushers. They fall into the same category as your big Class 8 vehicles. So suspensions, they have a very distinct, 3 distinct parts to it. Any U-bolt, spring hanger, or other axle position cracked, broken, loose, or missing, resulting in shifting of an axle from its normal position. After turn, lateral axle displacement is normal with some suspensions. Forward or rearward operation in straight line will cause axle return. So the second part is the actual spring itself, assembly itself. Annual inspection. Any leaf, spring assembly broken or missing. Any broken main leaf, coil spring, rubber missing. So they do a pretty good description of that. And don't forget the torque radius tracking component. So if you have the handouts, don't forget all that stuff is in there. I'm also trying to move on with the sake of moving on, you know, trying to make sure we get here timely. Any broken main leaf, and you see it over here, you know. Better picture over here, you know, spring leaf separating, you know. So all that stuff, you know, falls into that category. Is this okay? The only reason I'm doing that, I'm pushing time, is if you're underneath, you might say it is, you know, maybe not, but make sure you check on top too over there, okay? What is a main leaf? There's a description that it's actually, CVSA did a real good job in the North American Criteria book, and it's in your handout, so it does describe to you. Have that in your handout, you know, or if you redo this thing, you can put on pause and you can, you know, look at it a little better, because I'm also looking at a clock now. Radius rod leaf and spring having such a leaf has the same function as torque, and so on and so on, okay? Now, no-brainer, guys, right? That's an officer looking at it. My point being is, if an officer can find this stuff, we better be finding it. And don't forget, okay? A driver, that's a visual. A driver should be catching that kind of stuff too over here, you know. So it's not just us guys. Everybody has responsibilities. Now, this one here, I failed because look how close this spring is to the caliper bolt over here. If this ever gets a load on it and it goes down, we're snapping that bolt, that carrier. Both sides were like that, okay? Leaf springs defective. Now, weak springs, getting ready to touch brake caliper. Now, this is where I said New York State did a better job. They actually put it in there, that sagging springs, okay? So, and of course, what holds the spring ends together? You got it, the bushings and the pins. And first thing in my mind is when I'm underneath it and that there is no gap here, I'm putting a jack in there and I'm separating them, okay?
Let her down, see what she does.
Now we let it up. It's a lot of play in there, guys, okay?
Give me a galunk.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a nice one.
I think I had something in that suspension too, but if I remember, I'll get back to it, you know, try to keep them. Oh, this is good, guys. Hone in on this for a second here, just so everybody can see that. Okay. It's a piece of wood over here. Now back up a little bit so we can, I gotta make sure everybody catches it, okay? This is a new recyclable spring developed by a new suspension manufacturer. They're looking for distributors. I wanted to throw a little plug for these guys. If you're interested, see me after this training. Chances are good for their product to meet farm and farm covered vehicle exemptions for transporting their products, okay? Not to mention, this is a very easy installation. It's simple, gonna require minimum. Those of you that replace springs and stuff, you know how hard it takes, you know. And you guys better not take me seriously here, guys. I'm just kidding. But this actually came from a roadside one. I think it was Tanner, you know Tanner. the state commercial vehicle. He sent me that picture over there. He caught it on the road like that. So, yeah. This one is hard, guys. This is steer axle, tires rubbing in the spring when making a left turn, going to, you know, and you know it's a steer axle. There's my tie rod. Now, that tells me that the tire has been going in there. Eh? Now, is it a steering problem? Maybe something's misadjusted or whatever the case may be, you know. And this came in a discussion on quite a few years ago. I was doing some training over at the New York State Police Academy, and I brought that slide up. We were taking a little bit of a break, you know, from other stuff, showing the guys about some of the regulation stuff I do. And it took about an hour. Everybody discussed everything, and they came to the conclusion, if this gets pulled over on the roadside and they turn the wheel and that wheel is not in at that moment at a time, they really technically can't write it up. Well, I'm not a fan of that, because again, if that vehicle's down the road, it's going like this, something is wrong here, guys, is the point I guess I'm trying to make, okay? And this slide is just food for thought. If this driver turns and this wheel locks in over here for some odd reason, and he gets jammed up and he's trying to get out of the turn, you know what I'm saying? You know, and the wheel won't turn and he's still in motion. So, but, you know, those are all food for thought that, you know, we all should be thinking about. And of course, everybody's got airbags. This meets the requirement, shifting of the axle. You know, I might be a few minutes late. Just bear with me, guys. And if you got to drop out, this is going to be, you know, it's going to be online. You'll always get it. So might be running about 5 minutes late, okay? This is a no-brainer. We're heading into the frames over here. Frames, cross members, okay? This is on the back of the cab. You need to look for that kind of stuff if you can't miss it. And usually I would ask, what would you be looking at over here? Somebody drilled and put a bolt through here. And yet on the frame it says, do not cut, weld, or drill, you know, on the flanges of the rails. Eh? This is, again, side of rails. Crack over here. Eh? How could a driver miss that? I'll be very honest with you, let alone an annual inspection or whatever the case may be, you know. Now, you need to go underneath it, because all that stuff is in the frames, okay? Missing bolts and so on, you know. The frame, what you're looking at here, this is it for the frame in 393.201. That's it, guys. Just think about it. The frame or chassis, commercial vehicles, shall not be cracked, loose, saggy, or broken. Bolts or brackets securing cab or body of vehicle must not be loose. Frame rail flanges between shall not be bent, cut, or notched except as specified by manufacturer. Parts accessories shall not be welded to the frame or chassis of commercial vehicle except in accordance with the vehicle manufacturer's recommendations. No hole shall be drilled in the top or bottom rail flanges. That's it in a nutshell. The point I'm always trying to make is, now, take any given vehicle, look how long that chassis is. Look at how many cross members you're going to have in there. Look at how many potential holes. This is such a kind of huge area to find so many things wrong with that. Eh? Is this okay? Where would you find it? All right. Now, if I was to ask you where would you find it, this is how you would find it. Okay. In Appendix A, it says all lighting devices, reflectors required by 393 shall be operable, right? So if you go in Part 393, that's the only way you're going to make sure that you're covering all your bases. Subpart B, lamps, reflective devices, and electrical wiring. This section is comprised of Section 393.9 to 393.30. That very last thing in there has 393.30, battery installation. Every storage battery in every vehicle, unless located in engine compartment, shall be covered by a fixed part of the motor vehicle or protected by a removable cover enclosure. So, but also, if you've never gotten into there, the storage battery compartment adjacent metal parts which might corrode by reason of battery leakage shall be painted or coated with an acid-resistant paint or coating, shall have openings to provide ample battery ventilation and drainage. Also, whenever the cable to the starting motor passes through a metal compartment, cable shall be protected against grounding by an acid and waterproof insulation bushing. So, if this is actually in there, and this actually, believe it or not, is indirectly telling you from Appendix A go to 393.30, because that is part of the lighting, and there is your answer to is that okay or not. Okay. Exhaust, right? Any exhaust system determined to be leaking point forward. Bus, of course, boy, you've got to watch out with buses. Gasoline powered, excess of 6 inches forward to the rearmost of the bus. Other than gasoline, in excess of 15 inch, the diesels. Other than gasoline power, forward of a door and window. So there's regulations to that. The big thing is that you don't want burning, can't be located where you're going to have burning, charring, or damage to electrical wire, the fuel supply, and so on. Okay. Then do yourself a favor, if you get 393.83, it actually states no part of the exhaust system shall be temporarily with wrap or patches. You might never have known that. This is a no-brainer. It's straightforward, guys. No fuel leaks, no missing fuel cams, securely attached. But you need to look, you need to go underneath it. Those of you who worked on this stuff, you know how often you're going to have some issues on the frame where they're tucked away in there a little bit. Okay? Where would you find the requirements for rear impact guards and rear end protection? Okay. Now, in that 393 section, 0.86, lists out guard must be labeled, specifies label content, also physical requirement. Appendix A does not require to check the label. So if you're doing annual inspection, you don't check for the label. But you need to check the physical dimension requirements and presence. Okay. Violation, I'm not cited for, this is out of service, cited for certification label requirements for rear impact, okay? There is a push, I'll tell you right now, there is a push to get that label requirement going in Appendix A. Do you realize how many trailers are traveling up and down the roads that don't have labels? So the only option you have is, if you own those trailers, you need to get a hold of the manufacturer, and if you're a manufacturer, would you just hand out these labels just like that? Sure, I'll mail you one sight unseen. I don't know, we're opening up a huge can of worms, and actually just recently one trailer manufacturer got a major recall. I don't know, it was 3,000 to 4,000 trailers because the bumpers weren't for quite a few years set back the way they should be. Now, walk away with this, people. This is on a guidance. May an inspector certify commercial motor vehicle as meeting the periodic inspection standards of 396.17. She cannot see all the components. No, the fixing of a decal or sticker preparation report as proof inspection indicates compliance with all the requirements of Appendix A to Part 396, excuse me. Let me interpret this to you, okay? The way I'm reading it is, nobody probably cares if you pull a wheel, if you don't pull a wheel, and to be honest with you, maybe don't know, I hope I'm wrong, maybe nobody cares if you even look at it, but they're hanging their head on one thing, that when you put your name on it, whether it be your name, your sticker, or whatever, you are saying one thing, people, okay? Indicates compliance with all the requirements, Appendix A. So whether you did any of that, when you put your name on it, you are making a strong statement. Does that make sense? So I just wanted to make sure that you understood that. Okay? Now, unfortunately, sometimes it's hard to get under a vehicle with creepers and everything. If you're progressive, maybe the next thing, better idea is flip that vehicle over, the trailer or tractor, and then you can visually walk back and forth, and if everything is fine, put it back in. Guys, I'm just kidding, Any questions? I know we're 5 minutes late. We're back to the same thing, that, trying to put 10 pounds in a 5-pound pail. And to be honest with you, I told you up front, this is just trying to cover some key points. If anything, I hope you I brought you some awareness, get into those sections, and really look at a lot of that stuff, because the data shows on the roadside, it's there. The violation have been going on for years after years, and I'm thinking that if we do our job the way we're supposed to, I think we can reduce some of those violations. But more so, if we want to do our job, I'll be very honest with you, somebody needs to rewrite these regulations. As good as they are, okay, there is so much room for improvement, okay. I've been doing the regulation part of it for years, and it seems like it's the same stuff over and over. And guys, especially when you get into electronics and everything else, technology changes, new different components come in play, okay, the way we work changes, and so on and so on. A good example is for driver pre-trips, when I do those, there is a trend to go so highly sophisticated electronics, and they're trying to push that stuff with doing it with electronics and digitally stuff. I'm not quite sure if that's the right direction. For drivers pre-trips, they have gadgets out there that you put barcodes on the side of the frame and everything, and of course those manufacturers might not like what I'm going to say, but the idea of pre-trip is to ensure that the driver does it. This is just an example. You walk by and you hit that, you hit that, you hit that, you hit that. The assumption is, oh yeah, okay, the driver looked at it. But we're back to the same thing. Looking, and kind of marking it is not the same as really looking. Really looking. That's what we need to do. We need to emphasize to really look, not just do a visual glance on there. So I'm going to let you guys go. Hopefully this worked for you. I'm not quite sure what I want to do next month's Lunch and Learn. I might deviate from that stuff, but I also had a thought when I was putting this together. I might do something, stay with this area for another month. I might do something on tire, suspension, and steering, a little bit more in depth, not just annual inspection, but I mentioned the tires. There's a good area. Maybe we can do some stuff with that. I had suspensions in here. Let's look at different suspensions. I'm just throwing food for thought out there. So if you guys want, shoot, on the chat box, if you're still there, throw me some ideas. And the other thing too is if this was worthwhile for you guys, do me a favor, hit a yes, or if you didn't like it, hit a no. Just let me know that, I'm kind of not wasting my time doing this kind of stuff. And thank you again. And Alex, keep the chat box on for a few minutes, even though everybody wants to go, and this way I'll just see if anybody's on there that has any ideas. So chat away, guys. Type in there, do whatever. We'll leave it on for a few minutes. First of all, I got to learn how to use this 31, 36 new messages. Okay. Thanks. Excellent. Keep it up. It was great. Yes. Very good. Very good. Beautiful. Guys, I really appreciate that. I really do. Should rusty bud wheels be sand blasted and painted? There are manufacturers, to be honest with you, that actually do that. That painting, I'll be very honest with you, years and years ago, it has to be done properly, because painting the bud wheels, and then putting them together, that actually, believe it or not, affected the torque of the wheel nuts and everything. And that's a good discussion. Maybe, like I said, if we do tires or something. But that's a very good question. Okay. Appreciate it. Great question, Andy. Yeah, good question. Framing mount would be good to be on more. Yeah, absolutely. We can keep the ball rolling on this stuff. Like I said, we can truly, it's not a bad idea, because to tell you the truth, if I'm looking down, I'm looking at the chat box here, but that's not really a bad idea. Let's keep the maintenance end of it going, because that is the backbone of our industry over here, so, very, 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 very nice, And keep in mind too, probably, I think, give it a week. You know, we recorded this. I'll shoot the recording out, and then Dorman can post all this also, and you'll have a second chance at this. You'll always see it. You know, same tire. What you do, replace or repair the tire. Well, it all depends on where the nails are. First of all, are they in the treads? And because at any given time, you could have a customer come in, you know, and you do a little patching or nail hole, you know, repair, and then next week they might have another one. So it's not uncommon to see, you know, a tire with a few, you know, a couple of nail holes. And especially, I'll be very honest with. I'll be honest with you, it kind of like if you do a lot of like garbage hauling in the landfills and stuff, it's like, you know what, you're going to try to repair those, because otherwise you'll be replacing tires almost every single week, you know. And again, the reason I said placement of the nails, you know, if it's anywhere on the sidewall. And again, that's a good thought. Maybe I might do tires and suspension steering, and if, you know, we'll discuss a lot of that stuff. Need someone for chemicals, for rust that works. Oh, amen to that. Amen to that. You absolutely, absolutely. Especially if you're in the Northeast, you know. I do patch plugs on tires, patch inside, and plug comes through puncture. That's a very good way. That's a very good way. Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Especially, you know, you're on the right path because again, when you look at the cost of these tires today, they are expensive. I mean, I'm not that anything else isn't expensive anymore. I mean, you go to grocery store, I'm down to buying bologna now. Just kidding, guys. But even that's getting expensive, you know. So, I mean, we're in a whole new different world, you know. So, you know, I'm gonna shut the camera off, okay? But I will watch I'll watch the comments, and again, you know, with the camera off, for those who had to leave, again, thank you so much for hanging in there and watching. I mean, you guys are the cream of the crop. You guys are the backbone of the industry, to tell you the truth, you know. And again, thanks for the vote of confidence. So I'm gonna shut the camera down. Thank you.